Welcome back, everyone, to From the Stands is the college football game day show. It is week 6 here. Andy's throwing up a 4 and
Four,
1.
4-1. I don't know if you guys remember last week's show. Tom throwing up the 4-0, so I'm throwing the shade after Brian and I called it. We called the win. Tom, I won't be mean anymore the rest of the episode. That's all I have to say.
Yes, he is, of course, talking to Tom Scavetta here, our resident Notre Dame fan. Tom, you took the loss, but how's it going?
It's going all right. At least I know it's the college football show, but you predicted a Giants win on Sunday, so that kind of made up for it a little bit. It's going all right. It's a tough loss because Notre Dame has looked really pedestrian their first few games of the season, so now it's kind of like you have to run the table convincingly in order to even get consideration to make the college football playoff. So, um, it was really tough. The mixing matching of quarterbacks didn't really make sense to me. Tyler Buchner, Drew Pine. Cohn threw a pick in the red zone. So I don't know if you want me to go too far into it now, but it was a tough day. You guys would be appalled by the amount of Notre Dame fans that are in the state of New York. There's a lot of Notre Dame bars, and it's crazy because if you walk in, you're a fan of another team, you'll get looked at. It's hysterical. But it was unfortunate. I don't want to say I saw it coming, but I knew this would be a tough one to win. But as the Notre Dame fan, I had to have hope in, uh, just hopefully Mayer is okay for next week, and hopefully who the starting quarterback is for Virginia Tech, because I preluded that I think Virginia Tech is not going to be a walkover game either. They're a tough place to play, so. It's very unfortunate, but hats off to you guys. Hats off to Desmond Ritter, even though I don't like what he said, and I still stand by that. I think that was really, really dumb on his behalf. But yeah, shout out Bearcats. Their defense was outstanding, and better luck next time to my Irish.
Andy, Illinois did have a win. Not as tough as an opponent, but how's your week going after that win?
Well, listen, we'll take any win that we can get. I'm going to give a shout out to Chase Brown, Illinois running back, 257 yards and 2 touchdowns. The 257 is, I think, 4th all time in a single game in Illinois football history. So he was absolutely getting whatever he wanted. Yeah, of course, it is against Charlotte, but Illinois got to get wins somehow. They're currently 2-4. If they want to get to 4-6, or if they want to get to 6-6 bowl eligibility, they're going to have to go 4-2 at least. They do have to, I think, play on the road at Iowa and Penn State, so there's no chance there. I think other than that, they've got like Northwestern, Minnesota. Oh, who else? Like a couple other beatable teams, but they'll find some way to fuck it up. So awesome win. It was nice to see them get back in the win column. It hurts. Like, you guys might look at me crazy, but they legitimately could be like 4-2, or you could make a case for 5-1 right now if they knew how to manage the clock or make plays in late game situations. But we're 2-4. Start of the Big Bert era. We'll give them a year to kind of settle in. But yeah, great weekend of football. Like one of the most hyped up weekends of football we've had all year.
Definitely.
Which I mean, obviously, I loved every minute of it, but it was a little disappointing. Some of the games, I would say. But yeah, I'm here. I'm happy to be here. Excited to talk about our little recap and then get into this new week of football. So.
And we will jump right in the recap because I do not want to talk about UCF and that loss. I'll blame it on we're short on time. That's what I'm going to go with here.
Wow, what a week. Illinois, the only one of the three of us that got a win. Wow,
Yeah.
just so you know, it's a rare week. Jesus Christ.
So we'll jump right into the weekly recap. What other games besides you guys' home teams caught your eye here from this last week? Andy, we'll start with you.
So I don't want to pour it on Tom here, but I do want to mention the Cincinnati game. It was a great game. They almost fell apart in the second half. I think we were talking about it. I was shocked about how many Cincy fans there were at the game. There was a lot of red in that stadium at South Bend. And they go on the road. They end up getting it done. I think Desmond Ridder had a great game. It was like 297, 2 scores. Ford was pretty decent on the ground. I think about 70 yards. The defense played great. They were getting a lot of pressure, a lot of quarterback hits on whoever the Irish were throwing back there. Other than that, a big win for Georgia, who I think made the biggest statement. 37-0 over Arkansas. Absolutely, like the Razorbacks just look lost out there. Like that defense, I'm sticking to it. They are the best defense in the country. And then, of course, we have Bama just, absolutely sticking it to Lane and the Ole Miss Rebels. The Crimson Tide had their popcorn ready, ladies and gentlemen. That was like, those are the two games I mentioned earlier that were kind of depressing because we hyped them up so much. Like, oh, this could be this changing of the guard in the SEC. Like, are these teams for real or not? And it's not that they lost, but it's just like, okay, yeah, we saw how much farther ahead Georgia and Alabama are than the rest of this, than the rest of the field. So I cannot wait for the Georgia-Bama matchup. In the SEC as well, we had Mississippi State taking down, who was it, Texas A&M, right? Michigan taking it to Wisconsin. I'm sorry, I mentioned a bunch here, but there were a lot of really good games. I had a full fucking 12 hours of football on Saturday. It was amazing. Oregon got screwed at the end. You'll hear about that later. And then the last game I wanted to mention was Hawaii, shouting them out. They took down Fresno State at home. Jake Haener, really uncharacteristic performance. Jesus Christ, I can't talk. I think he threw 4 interceptions. Yeah, 4 interceptions. Kind of didn't blow the game. The defense didn't play super well, but really uncharacteristic performance from not just Haener, but the whole Bulldog squad. And, I mean, good on Hawaii for getting a win over a ranked opponent.
Yeah, that was a fun one. 4 interceptions. I think he was just going for the yards there and just yakking them up because he did have almost 400 yards. But yeah, the Oregon loss obviously very, very bad. We'll touch on Cincinnati here and that Notre Dame game in a little bit. I want to talk about the Kentucky game. That was a fun one, mainly because I hate Florida, but that's their second win, I believe, in the last 35 home games for Kentucky against Florida. That's one of those. That's one of those streaks. Just as it's so draining when a team just keeps coming to your home and beating you and beating you and beating you. Especially Kentucky's usually a decent team. It's not like they're terrible. They're usually 15 to 25 ranking. Then they'll fall out, get back in. But they're not a bad team. So that was fun to see those fans rush the field again. Yeah, like you said, Ole Miss Bama wasn't as fun as we thought.
Well, now hold on. Now Kentucky's 5-0. Now it's their turn to go to Bama or Georgia and get mollywopped.
Yes, yep. And then also, speaking of mollywopped, like you said, Arkansas absolutely mollywopped behind Georgia.
What were you thinking?
We talked. It's interesting because we talked about. I think it was Andy on the last show talked about Arkansas maybe taking advantage of the noon game, getting the crowd into it slowly, but it was the exact opposite. Arkansas sleptwalked through the first quarter, 21-0. Obviously, Georgia probably toned it down a little bit once, things were rolling there, but this last 3 quarters are a little bit better. Again, Georgia's still in a league of their own compared to Arkansas for anyone that watched that game, but, the rest of the game at least wasn't as much of a stomping as that first quarter, so...
would they start off with like a safety or like 3 punts? It was just like they couldn't even get past their own 40-yard line for the first majority of the first half. And then I usually right on this show, guys, and once again I was the run game completely neutralized. Jefferson couldn't pass at all. Georgia's defense is for real, dude, and they are the best chance, the biggest threat to Alabama, in my opinion.
Yeah, they're scary. Tom, besides the Notre Dame Cincy game that I know you watched, what else caught your eye?
Well, I did catch some of the Georgia-Arkansas game on my phone. It was crazy. Neither quarterback threw for 100 yards. I know Stetson Bennett was in the game. And the Dogs outrushed the Razorbacks 273-75. So there's why they won the football game right there. We mentioned Oregon falling to Stanford. Tanner McKee had 3 touchdown passes for the Stanford Cardinal. I mean, I just thought that was insane. And then, the other game, I know I touched upon it before, but when you turn the ball over 3 times early on, you're not going to win football games. And Notre Dame set themselves up for failure on Saturday. So, it's very unfortunate, but those are kind of my 3 games. I didn't really get to catch many other games. I mean, you guys mentioned a couple others. I know Texas A&M, they were very high ranked, and now all of a sudden they're unranked. So, they've dipped a lot,
2
and
straight losses.
Iowa continues to move up in the rankings. We can say what we want about their quarterback, but
Hey, 51 points.
They're still there.
They are.
They're still there.
And then just very quickly, I want to, because I pointed this out last week that Michigan fans might be mad that we left them off the slate. That Louisville-Wake Forest game, I don't know if anyone watched it, but that was a really good game. That was a good-ass game.
Yeah.
And then, of course, capped it off with that game-winning field goal in the dying seconds. Over 1,000 yards of offense.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a really cool game. But that'll wrap it for the weeklies here. I'm sure most people caught a lot of the games anyways. We're going to move into a segment called Contender or Pretender. Some of these, some people think are for real. Some think they're just straight up pretenders. We're going to start off here with our first one, which is Michigan. They're currently trending in the Big Ten, ranked number 14. Still have some big games left on the schedule. Are they a contender here, or are they a pretender, Tom?
Well, the thing about Michigan, and of course, I mean, you already know what my answer is going to be before it even comes out of my mouth because I'm a Notre Dame fan. But in my opinion, they have the second best edge rusher in the nation behind Kayvon Thibodeau. Aiden Hutchinson has 4.5 sacks in 5 games. David Ajabo has been really good for them too defensively, and they have 2 outstanding tailbacks in Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins, who are combined for 13 touchdowns. So that's a recipe for success right there. You have 2 backs you could rely on. I really like Cade McNamara. He's been turnover free through the first 5 games, and Cornelius Johnson is the guy that he has to rely on. And the Wolverines have been a very impressive team. They're 5-0. They moved up 5 spots, but they haven't really played anybody yet, and they only beat Rutgers by 7. I'm still looking at their schedule. They have number 11 Michigan State. They have number 4 Penn State, and they have number 7 Ohio State. They're dropping probably 2 of those games, if I had to imagine, at least 1. So in my personal opinion, they are pretenders only because of their schedule. Although I will say this, if they play well in those games, I may have to go back on that Jim Harbaugh getting fired statement that we were kind of debating over early on in the season, because he's done a really nice job. I know Rutgers was not a convincing win, but unless they shit the bed in these 3 ranked games, then I mean you can't really complain about the season, even if you don't make the college football playoff. But I do think they are pretenders.
Yeah, I mean it's like a typical Michigan. I mean, I've said this for several other teams, but Michigan also applies here. Schrodinger's Michigan, where they just kind of hover in that mid 15 to 20 range, and you never actually know they're good if they're good until 3/4 of the way through the season, because that's when their big games are usually scheduled. I mean, Michigan State's been faltering a little bit, but I mean they're ranked this season, so that's going to be a big game. And then they have Ohio State just a few weeks later. But yeah, they've got some good players on a solid all-around squad this year, and it does seem to me like a bit of a different squad. Usually, I'll catch a half of Michigan, because usually, I mean, Big Ten games are pretty decent, and if not, you get to laugh at Michigan. So it's a win-win for neutral fans. But this team looks, I don't know, they don't look sketchy. If that makes sense. That just seems to be a common theme of Harbaugh's teams. They'll, at least in Michigan, they'll have a decent start, and then halfway through the season, they just not just shit the bed, but they look panicked on the field, and this team looks cohesive. So yeah, I think they have a good amount of pieces here. McNamara, Corum. I don't think we're going to see anything like an undefeated Michigan or maybe one loss Michigan. I think they could beat a team like Penn State. We'll see how that game against Iowa goes for Penn State this week to get a real test on Penn State's team here. But yeah, I don't as a contender for something like a CFP, I would say probably not. Contender maybe for Big Ten championship game. I could see maybe happening though. So they're kind of in the middle for me. But if we're going CFP here, I'm going to go with Pretender. Andy?
I'm going to go with Contender, boys. I got to go against the grain here. Going Contender. John Harbaugh knows that I'm sorry. Is it? No, it's
Jimmy.
Harbaugh. Jim, it's Jimmy. The human body craves contact. Well, one of my favorite Jim Harbaugh quotes. He knows that his back is kind of against the wall. He knows that seat is warming up. He knows he needs to have a big year. He knows he needs to beat Ohio State this year as well. And I think this is the best chance Michigan has to beat Ohio State than that they've had in, let's say, 10 years, guys. Like, legit. If you look at the schedule, I love what Tom brought up about I love what Tom brought up about the ranked opponents, because if you look at who else they have to play, so it's like this week they get a Nebraska team, which Michigan is actually only favored by 3.5. I think they go to Nebraska. They have Northwestern still on the schedule. They also have, I think, God damn it, I literally just had it pulled up. It shows you my memory is just shit, guys. I'm sorry. I have it right here. Northwestern, Indiana, Maryland, Nebraska. So let's say they win those and drop the 3 against the ranked opponents, a 9-3 Michigan. They're probably still going to be in the top 25. They probably still get a pretty decent bowl game. I think Harbaugh's job is still saved. I think they're better than that. I think they go 10-2 or 11-1. I think they take care of Michigan State this year. I think they take care of Ohio State. I think Penn State clips them in Happy Valley. I'm going Contender for the Michigan Wolverines because they have to. They have to be for Jim Harbaugh to save his job.
So, all right, 9-3. You think Harbaugh is safe, old Jimmy?
Yeah, I think he could go. Yeah, that's probably better. Yeah. But I think if he were to go 9-3 and, like, let's say they dropped one to like Indiana or Maryland, but they beat Ohio State, I think he'd save 9-3.
Yeah, I think the boosters might enjoy that one enough to give him at least another year. All right, moving on to the next one we have here, Kenny Pickett. He's the senior quarterback for the Pittsburgh Panthers team in a struggling ACC, but he's not struggling pretty much for the first time in his career so far. I talked this guy up 2 years ago. I thought he was going to be the next big thing. It took him a while, but he's having a pretty solid season so far. 19 touchdowns, 1 interception, 1,700 yards, and a 90.1 QBR, which is second in all of college football right now. Is this guy a contender or pretender? Andy, will start with you on this one. He's moving up some draft boards.
Yeah, so I'm going to go Contender again, just because if you look at the top of the Heisman race, it's really Corral, Bryce Young, and then who else? Why not throw Pickett in this conversation? My only concern about this is Pittsburgh being unranked. I think they're going to have to keep winning ball games. They're going to have to move themselves into the top 25 for him to have a better chance, because I don't know, when was the last time we saw somebody win the Heisman from an unranked team, or even like not a top 10 team, right? So I think as far as that goes, like they're going to have to keep winning ball games. But if you look at what he's done this year, it's been nothing short impressive. He's gone for 300 plus yards in his last 3 games. That includes a 400-yard performance. I mean, it was over in University of New Hampshire is a 77-7 win, but anytime you can go for 405 touchdowns, that's an impressive day. But over his last 3 games, he's thrown 16 touchdowns. The loss to Western Michigan really is going to hurt them as far as like a ranking goes. But if you look at their schedule the rest of the way, they don't play any teams that are ranked currently. They've got Virginia Tech, Clemson, which Clemson is unranked right now, which is so weird. Miami, Duke, North Carolina, Virginia, and Syracuse. So they're going to have a couple tough games in there. But if Pittsburgh can finish, if they win out and they finish this year at 11-1, Kenny Pickett will be right in the thick of that Heisman conversation.
All right, Tom, contender, pretender, Kenny Pickett.
Well, Andy mentioned, they're playing a bunch of unranked teams, but they're playing a bunch of, really good programs. You're going up against Ukulele for Clemson. You're going up against Sam Howell for UNC. So the potential is there for Kenny Pickett to be a contender. And I love the fact that he's a 5-year guy. He's been in this organization for a long time. Yes, Pitt is 4-1. They do have a nice win against Tennessee on the road. And he's completing 72% of his passes. That 19 touchdown to just 1 interception ratio is very impressive. And in the game that they lost to Western Michigan, he still threw 6 touchdown passes.
Yep.
This guy's clearly a contender because we're literally scratching and clawing trying to find a third guy to throw in the mix with Matt Corral and Bryce Young. Kenny Pickett might be this third guy that we're looking for. So to be fair here, I do think he is a contender, but he does have somewhat of an uphill battle to come away with the trophy.
You mentioned draft stock, though, Brian. This is the year. This is the year for him to shoot up those draft boards because, we've talked about it, on the show, off the show about, we're not necessarily sold on this class of quarterbacks, and enter Kenny Pickett, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, Willis, I know some contentious opinions between everyone here on the show on what his value is in the draft. Like you said, Sam Howell at UNC, he's struggling a little bit. The team's struggling a little bit. He was, I thought, at one point a lock for top 10 based on how much scouts were talking him up for this upcoming draft. He started to fade away a little bit. So yeah,
they lost like all their weapons. I think he lost his top 2 running backs, his top 2 receivers, and their defense just sucks.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word,
right?
Their defense just sucks.
Yeah. So Tom, you threw out all the stats there. You pretty much touched on all the points here. I can't bring this up enough. When that touchdown to interception ratio is as good as something like this, and the players are making, good decisions. Yeah, last 2 years he's had 9 interceptions each season. Last year wasn't even a full season, so that doesn't look great. I think, what did they play? 8 games probably last year. When plus I guess bowl games. So when you're throwing an interception per game, that's never a great look when you're a 4th year redshirt senior. Sorry, or a redshirt junior last year, sorry. But yeah, even like you said, the Western Michigan game, that wasn't really his fault, and that could. I think teams will look past it, but I do agree that if they were ranked, this would look a lot better. But he did throw 6 touchdowns that game. I don't know what else you want him to do. The defense just deciding to let Western Michigan score, 44 points on you is never going to help. So, I'm also going with contender here, both for Heisman and for sneaking in maybe first round of the draft because he's looked good so far. And if he can keep it up, with these other people struggling, he's got a pretty good chance at, getting into that, low 20 to 30 range, which to me, people don't talk about this enough. I think that's where you want to be as a QB. Like we saw Mac Jones was 4th or 5th picked QB this past year. He's probably in the best situation out of all those QBs that got drafted. You guys got Justin Fields there in Chicago, Andy, but he's getting absolutely
committed to him. Committed to him.
But he's getting murdered because the O-line can't protect him. Meanwhile,
this isn't a football show. They only gave up 1 sack last week, my friend. He threw for 206 yards. So
okay, all right,
okay.
I'll
just wait for this week. They'll give up 9 more.
Yeah, but no. Personally, if I was a QB, that's where I would want to fall. And he may fall in that range because he's been looking pretty good. Moving on. Go ahead. You got a final thought there?
No, I agree with you. You want to be everybody wants to go 1-1. You want to be the best, but look at Trevor Lawrence too. There's an 0-4 Jaguars team with Urban Meyer sticking his finger in young girls' buttholes in Ohio on their off weekends. So, Mac Jones. He's playing for arguably the best head coach of all time, and the later you go, usually that means your team is a little bit better. You're going to step into a better situation. You nailed it, Brian.
There we go. So good luck to you, Mr. Kenny Pickett. Moving on to our next one and our last one here, we have Cincinnati. I told you we were going to talk a little bit more about it later. Cincinnati downed Notre Dame at Notre Dame this weekend. Tom, we'll start with you this one because I know you watched probably the game from start to finish. Is Cincinnati now, with this big win, an actual contender, or are they just a pretender?
Yes, they are a contender.
Okay.
They beat a team that made the college football playoff last year, and Notre Dame did deserve to make it last year. A lot of people were like, well, why did they make it? They got blown out by Clemson. We also beat Clemson. Alec Pierce is an outstanding receiver. You have a great quarterback in Ritter. I'm still going to argue that there were times of this game where Notre Dame kept shooting themselves in the foot. The interception in the red zone, Chris Tyree with the fumble that set up Cincinnati to score, gave them a short field. There were really no big plays for this Notre Dame offense outside of that 32-yard touchdown pass to Braden Lindsey in the fourth quarter, where we cut the deficit to 4 since our kicker Dorr tried to miss the extra point. But the Bearcats defense held Kyron Williams to 45 yards. Now, granted, Notre Dame's O-line is not what it once was, right? That's what happens when you have 4 O-linemen get drafted within the first 3 to 4 rounds of the NFL draft, right?
This is insane.
So, I mean, you have to rebuild that line a little bit. This is a little bit of a rebuilding year for that Notre Dame offensive line, that Notre Dame receiving core. And, despite them being in somewhat of that rebuild, I'm not going to say rebuilding, I'll word it as retooling. I think the Bearcats really have a nice shot because their toughest opponents remaining are UCF, who has not looked good, Tulsa, and then they do have a ranked opponent left, but they're ranked 24th. That's SMU. So on paper, that's their toughest matchup remaining. And if they handled number 9 Notre Dame the way that they did, beating them by 11 points, 10, I'm going to say, because they missed the extra point. But I think Cincinnati has a really good shot of making this college football playoff based off their schedule and based off their resume. They are contenders.
I'm also going contender here. Andy, you touched on it earlier. That crowd followed that team into the depths. All right, we're not talking hundreds. We're not talking thousands. There might have been 1 million Cincy fans in that stadium. They were.
Oh, relax.
There was a sea of red in 2 different corners. If I'm being realistic, I think there was 5,000 Cincy fans that somehow got into that stadium. I don't know how they got in. Typically, Andy is dying over here.
Relax.
Typically, you don't want to. If you're gonna sell to opposing fans, you better jack that shit up, triple the price of the ticket if you're gonna let all those fans in. And that's if you know for a fact you're gonna beat a team. In a big game like that, you don't want your fans selling tickets to opposing fans. But they were loud. I mean, you
played a factor.
It did. They traveled. They were loud, and I think just being able to look up into the, see the corner of your eye, that sea of red. I think that did help because they were under pressure from the very get-go there. Notre Dame driving down. It looked like they were going to score on that. Was the first drive of the game, right?
Yeah.
And then Gardner
took out Jack Cohn. Stick with one quarterback. Stick with one quarterback.
I think everyone agrees with you. I don't know what's going through Brian Kelly's mind. I think some coaches need to be executed if we're going to go with Brian Kelly's quote here. But yeah, the team looked very good. They were under a lot of pressure here. This is probably the biggest game in the last couple decades for them. It's the biggest game for the American Conference probably in the last couple decades. Well, I mean, the conference has converted names and all that, but you know what I mean? For the G5, I'll say. And now they do have a legitimate shot. Like Andy said, this upcoming schedule looks very, very weak. I hate to say it, UCF is not good this year. Dylan Gabriel is injured, which probably would have been our only chance if he could pull a rabbit out of his hat. That's probably not going to happen. He's still going to be questionable. We had freshman Mikey Keene, cool little name there, but not enough going on skill wise yet. Still a very fresh QB, so I don't think we're going to be able to pull it off. They play Tulane, Tulsa, USF, who's very weak. It's probably riding on that SMU game. And I tweeted out last week, it was kind of a given, but I said since he wins this game, they're going to be in the top 4 come the October 16th rankings. Because, like we said, Iowa plays Penn State this upcoming week. Unless that game is like a 3 overtime nail biter that ends, with a field goal, I don't know how you don't jump Cincy into that 4 spot. And then it's up to everyone else to show out that they deserve to pass them. Right now behind them is Oklahoma. They don't look like they're going to do that. Like you said, Michigan is undefeated. We think they're a bit of a contender. They're probably still going to have to go undefeated, or at least one loss with maybe a loss to Penn State, and then win that Big Ten championship game, or else I don't see them passing Cincy. So I think this is a real contender team here in Cincinnati. I'm excited as a fan of the AAC and the G5 here. Give us some respect. Give us a contender. We got one in Cincy. Andy, contender or pretender?
They're a pretender, and they now own the state of Indiana. Mark that down. Back-to-back wins over universities in Indiana. And this is – so the argument last year was they were good enough to make the playoff, right? But it was, they're not really beating their American Athletic Conference opponents by enough. They should be blowing them out. And then it was, they didn't like their strength of schedule. So now in back-to-back weeks, they go on the road and beat a Big Ten team. They go on the road and beat a ranked team that Tom mentioned, that made the college football playoff, absolutely deserved to be in the playoff last year. And you called it the biggest win in a couple decades. I think it's the biggest win in program history for Cincinnati. Like what this means, that is going to set them up. It is now, they hold their fate in their hands, right? You win out, you'd like to think they're in, especially in this year. We've seen Oregon's lost, Ohio State's lost. Those, at the time, those were 2 top 4, top 5 teams. So yeah, I'm definitely going with pretender. I love what Ritter's put together. If he keeps it up, maybe he gets thrown into that top 4, top 5 Heisman conversation. Jerome Ford's been a beast in the backfield. And in their defense, their defense has been outstanding as well. If you are Cincinnati, I think you hope SMU keeps winning until they play, just as you get you want as many ranked wins as you can, right? Like you said, UCF is having a down year, but so tomorrow they play they play Temple on Friday. They need to beat them by 40. They need to kick the shit out of Navy. Tulane's kind of having a down year. After taking Oklahoma to the wire, I think they're 1-4 or something like that. They just need to beat everybody they're supposed to beat handily, like South Florida. They should kick the shit out of them, and then hang on for the ranked wins. I still think Tulsa could be a tough game. Tulsa's a pretty good opponent. They have Davis Brin at quarterback as well, who's been pretty good for them for the past couple years. I'm going contender. Also, Tom, I don't mean to throw some salt in the wound, but Cincinnati's tweet they put out of all the clipping together the Brian Kelly interviews from when he was at Cincinnati, talking about how it's the place to be, was just elite social media. Just whoever tweeted that out deserves an award.
There we go. Second week in a row with a chef's kiss. And just some great content that they're giving us, that they're providing us.
Did you see the video, Tom?
No.
Okay.
I stayed off social media after the game. Yeah, it was.
Well, so for anybody that didn't see it, it was just a bunch of clips from Brian Kelly press conferences from when he was at Cincinnati, and they formed it into him saying something, but it was ultimate troll job.
They've talked a lot of smack for only winning 5 games, so they better hope they win out. Otherwise, this may come back to bite.
Or it is all for nothing. You're right. You're right. Absolutely right, Tom.
All right, and just quickly, because you were talking about strength of schedule, and I pulled it up. I can't see Cincinnati's last year, but when the argument for UCF was, their strength of schedule is shit because they're in the American. Typically, I think 2017 team was like 102 strength of schedule, and I believe the next year was like 88, or those might have been swapped, but so still pretty low. The Cincinnati team, I'm looking at it right now, strength of schedule is 58, which is not the best, but it's not as low even as some of the teams above them. Oklahoma's currently is 72nd, and Ohio State's currently is 55, so they're in the mix there as far as strength of schedule goes. So
I'm sold.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. And I'm glad you corrected yourself and said Contender at the end because you said Pretender first, and I was like, oh.
Did I say that?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Twice.
Well,
yeah.
I didn't mean that. I meant Contender. You guys know. I mean, I'm not often wrong on the show, but no, I meant Contender. I say a lot of wrong shit all the time. So thank you for calling me out on that because I totally would have been like, "What do you mean?" I would not even have noticed.
There we go. I just had to double check there. We're gonna move on to the next segment. I'm gonna do a quick little ruling on the field. We're gonna make a ruling about things that are a little bit of a toss up that people probably argue all the time about on social media. The first one here, we're gonna talk about what is the ruling on the field for fans and coaches and players apologizing to fans after some smack talk goes wrong. The first one we have here that is the best example of the week was Lane Kiffin. He said, get your popcorn ready in a pregame interview. People got their popcorn ready, but for all different reasons, as Alabama absolutely smacked Ole Miss all over the field. What is the ruling on the field for this one, Tom? Apologizing for smack talk. Yes or no?
I mean, I would say no, but in this case, you're playing Alabama. You're playing Alabama. At least wait until halftime. You know, like I mean, you don't know how the game's gonna unfold. Yeah, you have to apologize because you didn't do anything in the game. You did nothing. Alabama pretty much steamrolled over the Rebels. And look, I'm not. You know, I mean, you really shouldn't have to apologize for smack talk, but in this case, you might have to because I mean, you really put out an abysmal performance against the number one ranked team, and it's just something you don't do. And you know, if he did this sooner, you know, Bama would have had that written on a wall or something. You know, Lane Kiffin, quote unquote, get your popcorn ready.
Yeah, more locker room material, as we talked about last week with Ritter's comment. I'm going no. You should never apologize for something like this. It's very obvious that it's just him trying to get his team hyped up, trying to get the fans hyped up. They were an underdog through and through that game, despite, you know, how fun that team is. I wanted them to win. I wanted Arkansas to win also. Like I said, let's shake things up. But they were big underdogs. So you need things like that. You want your coach, you know, to help as much as possible. And, you know, if those guys are in the locker room watching that kind of stuff. These aren't small schools. They got TVs in there. They're watching Lane as they're getting dressed. I don't think you ever apologize. Yeah, they got smacked. Yeah, if there was a scenario where you would apologize, it's probably as top of the list as maybe you should. But yeah, it's all just hype. There's no harm, no foul here. But another one I want to bring up was one that I saved. The SMU coach, Sonny Dykes, apologizing because his SMU players tried to plant the SMU flag on the TCU logo a few weeks ago. He came out and apologized because there was a little bit of a scuffle there. Again, typically, I think that's absolutely hilarious. That was a big win for SMU. Like you said, they're ranked 24 now. They could be the biggest test for Cincinnati here, as if they continue to move up their rankings. As a team, listen, these kids are going to do stupid things like that. Planting a flag at your opponent's field, or maybe just let them get off the field first if you're going to do that, I guess is what I would say. But don't apologize for it. The kids are having fun. They just had a big win against an out-of-conference opponent from a P5 conference. So let it happen. I'm going no on this one. Andy, what's your ruling?
Yeah, I don't think he should have to apologize. I think it's funny. Like, like Lane has always been able to like take a joke and not really take himself too seriously too. Like, especially, after the whole falling out that he's had with 3 different fucking stops as a head coach. But I think he just kind of got caught up in the moment here. Like, this was a big night for him. This was his first trip back to Tuscaloosa since being the offensive coordinator and, from 2014 to 2016. Ole Miss scored 48 points against Bama in the year before and put up 647 yards. I'm sure he was thinking like, hey, we're about to do that again. He was quoted and saying, I don't even know why it came out. And I actually said to my offensive coordinator, I got on the headsets and said, I just said something really stupid. You better score a lot of points. And they didn't. So looks like he knew what he said, in the moment. He threw the headset. I think he just got caught up in the moment. He was excited for the game. He said he didn't really even know where it came from. He thought he heard somebody say it in the locker room. And the Alabama, sending their mascot out with the popcorn costume.
That was great.
He actually quoted the tweet and said it was funny. So I like, he knows that's all in good fun. But I'm sure next time they play Alabama next year, he will not be saying anything about it, or they'll probably make some type of joke about it in his pregame interview next year. Just book that. But yeah, I don't think he should have to apologize. It's not like he came out and said he was going to execute his players or anything, right, Tom?
Which Brian Kelly, love the non-apology there. He stuck with it. So
oh yeah, no, stick to your
I'm
guns.
all about that.
Also,
one.
I joke about that, but that was dumb. Like, obviously, you have to be living under a rock or just an absolute idiot to think he wants to fucking line up his players and go fire. Like, what the fuck? Like, he's a football coach. He's trying to get his players riled up.
Yeah. And we'll move into our next one here. Ruling on the field, conferences fining their teams for storming the field after a big win. Kentucky, just this past week, was fined by the SEC for storming the field.
Is that due to COVID stuff?
No, it's an SEC policy.
That's dumb.
Yeah, so I'm maybe a little bit more this year, but this was the 3rd violation. The last one was many years ago, I think 2014. So at least in totality, it's not because of COVID.
Brian, you brought it up earlier. This is Kentucky's first home win over Florida since the 80s, like 86 or something like that. God forbid they get a little excited and go celebrate with their team. As somebody who's stormed a field, Illinois over Wisconsin a couple of years ago, no big deal there. Just changed the whole landscape of the college football playoff. But it's incredible. Let the kids have fun. Those kids are hammered. They were rushing the field and going out to the bars to celebrate some more. Absolutely clown rule by the SEC. Clown rule by the SEC. Come on, dude. Come the fuck on. We just upset the number 10 team in the country that we haven't beat since God knows how long. Yeah, excuse the fuck out of me for getting a little bit excited.
Yeah, so I'm also going no here. This is absolutely ridiculous. I'm looking up the exact year. The second violation was in 2018. So not as far back as 2014, but that fine was $100,000. This one was $250,000. I can understand if you don't want teams, rushing the field 3 times in a year or whatever, like a 3-strike rule for 18 months, whatever you want to do. When you're, keeping receipts that are like a decade old where you have to, you open the book of fines and you got to blow the dust off it just to see when their last violation was. Oh, sorry, Kentucky. You rushed the field in 1987 and then again in 2018. So now we got to fine you $250,000 because you celebrated one of the biggest wins that you've had in recent years. This is very stupid to me. I don't know. I'd be curious to see what the number is for other conferences. Obviously, the SEC is probably the biggest moneymaker, so the fines are probably the biggest. But, I mean, there's got to be schools that probably can't afford it as much as, big-ass football programs like this. So, I mean, to me, I think this hurts more than it helps. Yeah, you don't want kids tearing down goalposts or anything, but, if you're just gonna party in the middle of the field, what the grounds crew has a little bit of extra work. That's nothing. The field will recover. The grass will recover. Stop doing stupid shit like this, SEC.
Player safety, right? Like that's obviously important. You make sure they're not like in the Florida players' faces,
Right.
like hitting them, or I'm sure they're gonna be throwing like the big "fuck you" and all that. But
Yeah.
I mean that part of it. Also, it's not Kansas rushing the field over fucking South Dakota. It's a ranked opponent. God damn it.
Yeah. Tom?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you both said it best. 35 years is a long time, but SEC does have a policy in place, and you can't control a crowd, especially a crowd that's hammered watching their football team. And I think it's a silly rule to have in place. I think part of it is due to the fact that the SEC has so many teams that are prone to getting upset because of how powerful that conference is, so that when it happens, they just want to maintain order from like a stadium perspective. You don't want to make your work post game that much more difficult. So, but I totally see where the fans are coming from here. It's been a long time coming. UK, undefeated ranked team. Love to see it.
All right. And then our third one here, third and last, injured first-round prospects sitting out the remainder of a season if they have a little bit of a knock. Obviously, the biggest name for this year is Kayvon Thibodeau. He's been dealing on and off with some issues. He's come back, tried to play a little bit in the Stanford game. But he's a top 3, maybe number 1 NFL prospect here. A few years ago, we had Ed Oliver out of Houston, sat out just the entire season. Didn't want to play at all, which, some people think is understandable. Some don't want you quitting on your team. Jamar Chase last year sat out of COVID. And then as of yesterday, Derek Stingley Jr. decided to have foot surgery, and that'll end his season. He's looking forward to the draft as well. So, Tom, we'll start with you on this one. What are your thoughts on kids sitting out, quitting on the season early to look forward to the NFL draft?
I don't necessarily love it because it hurts your draft stock. I don't think Thibodeau is guaranteed the number one overall pick. It depends on who's playing. Right now, it looks like it could be the Jaguars, it could be the Texans, it could be the Jets. The Jaguars are a team that has their quarterback right now, so they could be looking for a defensive player. Houston's going to be looking for a quarterback, right? So, that's something right there that you don't really know where you're going to end up. And I get it. He hasn't really done much in 2021. 8 tackles, 1 sack, and a forced fumble. And, I mean, it's a shame. They're coming off a 31-24 loss to Stanford and OT. So it gives you even more reason to kind of just sit out, knowing that you're probably not making the college football playoff at this point. But I think Thibodeau should play. I really do think he should play. But if it's going to risk his long-term impact in the NFL, then I think he should sit out. But in this case, I think Thibodeau should play. As far as Stingley goes, Mel Kiper listed him as the 3rd best available player in the draft. I think Stingley should sit out. Obviously, he's going to be forced to because that's, that foot injury. You want to make sure you're 100% ready and teams don't get turned off by you, as we saw what happened last year with the amount of players that just dropped due to injury suspicion, where Azeez Ojulari fell to the 2nd round of the draft because people were concerned about injuries that happened to him in high school.
Yeah,
so
I remember watching that with you, and you were very surprised at his drop.
Well, it turned out he has 3 sacks in 4 games. So jokes on the other teams that passed on him.
Yeah. For me, it's a tough one. The Ed Oliver thing almost is better to me than quitting halfway through the season. If you let your intentions known early, I can't remember his exact draft stock, but it did bump up over the offseason based on a few injuries. So I think once he moved solidly into the top 10 or top 10 prospect was probably when he made that decision. For someone like Kayvon Thibodeau, I mean, I understand it. If I was a player, like, I'll be entirely honest. If I had a little bit of a knock and I knew playing, could fuck up like a massive contract for me where you drop from, top 5 out of the first round, I'm absolutely going to sit out. Probably even if there's like a 40% chance of getting to the national championship game. Listen, you only get so many shots at a national championship, especially with these players usually coming out after 3 years, but you only get, an even smaller amount of a chance at playing in the NFL, which is the ultimate goal here. So, yeah, you want to see these kids finish out the season, but I completely understand their decisions when they do decide to sit out. So, I guess it all for Kayvon, like you said, that's the biggest one for this year. Probably intends or depends entirely on the severity of his injury, which I don't think many people know outside of Oregon's staff. So we'll see moving forward. I believe he took a targeting in the Stanford game here, so he'll get to rest for that first half anyways.
He's going to sit out in the first half of their next game.
Yeah,
so.
he'll get a nice rest there. Andy, what's your ruling on this one?
I like what Tom said about how you don't love that they're sitting out, but you see why they're doing it. Guys, 1.4% of college football players make it to the NFL. These dudes know that, especially if you're a guy like Stingley, who's, last year he dealt with injury. You're done. Shut that off, get healthy, and let's play. LSU's not going anywhere this year. And why you said it, Brian, why jeopardize your chance to make it to the NFL? I think Tom, was it you that said he's the number 3 draft prospect right now? Yep. He's just insane. He's been considered the best cornerback in college football for the past 2 or 3 years. I don't think he has much to prove on the field at LSU that he can't, just rehab, get healthy, and then do that in workouts with these specific NFL teams over the summer. As far as Thibodeau goes, I'd like to think that just this one loss wouldn't make him just go, okay, fuck this, because, I feel like NFL teams could look at that and be like, well, we don't want that type of dude around. Like maybe he would do that if you get to the pros. But, Oregon's still in a position to win the Pac-12. You could still win a conference title. I think that does mean something to these guys as well. But I think there's actually ESPN showed it on Saturday. It's like if they were to lose to Stanford, they had an 11% chance of making the college football playoff. So you're saying there's a chance. My ruling here is, I think these guys have so many people in their ear, especially if they're the high-level prospect telling them what to do. At the end of the day, if they make a decision and they believe it's best for them, who am I to tell them no? So if they feel like sitting out, rehabbing, and working out on their own is the best way for them to prepare for the next level, then who am I to tell them no? So I am okay with this ruling.
All right.
Or whatever I'm supposed to say. Pro. What?
For it, against it.
Yeah,
whatever.
For it. Yeah, I'm for it.
All right. And that'll wrap up ruling on the field. We're going to move into our shots and chasers. But before that, we have our first round of Pick'em records here. This is the collated record so far, as long as last week's performance. Pretty tight so far. I had to go back and watch these to pick out the records. Andy, this would be an even tighter race, but in the first 3 weeks, you talked yourself out of several Big Ten teams out of spite as an Illinois fan, and flipped and lost all 3 of those. So
sounds about right.
Yeah, you could be 20-10 right now. But you did, starting I think in week 4, I can't remember which team it was, but you did jump on the Big Ten bandwagon and show some support, and it got you some wins. So 4-2 this week. Tom also 4-2 this week. For me, not so good of a week. 3-3. But anyways, we'll move into the shots and chasers for week 6. We have the Red River Showdown at noon as our noon shot here. Texas taking on Oklahoma. Tom, we'll start with you on this one. Who's taking it?
Well, OU's favored by 3.5 on the road. Texas 4-1, Oklahoma 5-0. Spencer Rattler is completing 76% of his passes. He's improving a little bit, but a 6-point win over Kansas State it's not really convincing me that Oklahoma can continue to win these types of games. Kennedy Brooks averages 6 yards per carry. I think he's a big catalyst in their offense. And Marvin Mims has been quiet. They've struggled to get him involved early on. However, Texas has a 40-21 loss to Arkansas on their resume, and Arkansas just got shut out by Georgia. As where you look at Texas, you have Casey Thompson's the quarterback they're going with, and he's been good. Their running back is electric by John Robinson, 7 touchdowns, and I like Jordan Whittington and Xavier Worthy, 7 combined touchdowns. So both teams have weapons on offense. However, despite Oklahoma's troubles, I still think their undefeated season continues this week, even though they are at Texas. I had to think about this game for a minute just because of the way Texas has been playing as of late, but I think Oklahoma is going to skate by with a 1-possession win against the Longhorns.
All right, Andy, Red River Showdown, whatever they want to call it these days. Who's winning it?
Guys, I've talked about how much I think Oklahoma are frauds all year. Casey Thompson and the Longhorns are marching into this game, and they are taking it away from Spencer Rattler, and he's a crybaby. I don't like him. So he has looked great this year, though. Okay, not great. He's looked good. He's looked okay. But we did have very, very high expectations for this guy, somebody that came in as a Heisman favorite, somebody that is a NFL draft hopeful, but 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions. He's not making as many big mistakes. Tom mentioned it. He's completing a high percentage of his passes. They don't really have those big plays that they were getting last year, aside from really the West Carolina game this year. I mean, the offense hasn't been terrible. I believe they're averaging like 38 points per game, 433 total yards. Not terrible. They can move. Obviously, they're doing something right if they're at 5-0. But let me tell you, I think Bijan Robinson is about to have himself a game for the Texas Longhorns. He's got 650 yards and 7 touchdowns already on the year. I think he goes big. I think Texas wins this game, and I think they win it by 3.
All right. I'm going Texas as well here. I agree. Oklahoma is pretty fraudulent so far. This game is going to be a scorcher, 92 degrees at the Cotton Bowl. I think these teams are going to be drained, and you're going to have to start looking at weapons that can produce day in and day out. Rattler has not been doing that so far for me. And on the other side of the ball, you have Bijan Robinson. I think we've said his name probably 10 different ways over a couple shows. I'm not sure which way it is. So sorry there, Robinson. But I think he's probably, if you were going to bet on a player to have a standout performance, I think it's going to be him. So I'm going to put my money here on what is probably going to be a pretty even game. But yeah, I think Texas is going to edge them out here. Rattler, 76%, but he still looks kind of shaky. Only has 4 interceptions, but Texas, in their 3 biggest games that they've played so far, which is TCU, Texas Tech, and that loss to Arkansas, they have 6 turnovers in those 3 games. So if they pull off a few against Rattler here, and Robinson has a decent day, Oklahoma's pretty good with that rush defense. Only 83 yards allowed on the ground. But yeah, it'll be a battle, but I like Texas here. Not sold on saying that they're back yet if they win, but I'm at least going to take them here for this Red River Shootout 2021. Tom?
Well, yeah, like I said, I'm going with Oklahoma in this game.
Sorry, did I already go to you?
Yeah, you already went over me. Yeah, I'm going with the Sooners. I know my cousin's going to be at this game, big Sooners fan, so can't go against Oklahoma here.
All right, so split decision on that one at noon. We also have in the chaser slot Ohio State taking on Maryland here. Tagovailoa. Probably butchered that as well. We love our names here, but we can't say them. Is taking on number 7 Ohio State, who also has looked shaky like Oklahoma, but they've probably been improving a little bit quicker than the Sooners have. Had some decent games. Obviously, Travion Henderson showing out for Ohio State. Maryland coming off that loss to Iowa, 51-14. If Iowa's scoring 51 points on you, you probably having issues. But who knows? This could be a surprise game. 21-point spread here. Andy, we'll start with you on this one. Who's winning it?
Ohio State rolls. They're going to kick their ass. Talia Tagovailoa has 6 interceptions on the year. 5 of those were last week against the against the Iowa Hawkeyes. This week against Ohio State, I don't think he's going to throw 5, but I don't think it's going to go well. They have Travion Henderson back for the Buckeyes, who's been outstanding with 500 yards and 7 touchdowns on the year. CJ Stroud, after that slow start, is kind of coming into his own, looks more comfortable. And I mean, how can you not be comfortable when you got guys like Chris Olave, who just tied Chris Carter's touchdown record with 27 for his career at Ohio State? And I think, also Garrett Wilson has just been outstanding. I think there's too many weapons for Ohio State. Maryland are a much improved football team. Mike Locksley has not done too bad of a job, since taking over. Obviously, they're sitting at 4-1. After this week, I think they go to 4-2. The last meeting between these two teams was in 2019. Ohio State took that one 73-14. It's at Ohio Stadium. It's in Columbus. Maryland's got an uphill battle. Talia hasn't looked terrible besides that, Iowa game. If they can take care of the ball, I think they can keep it, maybe stay within 21. But I think Ohio State wins this game pretty easily.
All right, Tom.
Yeah, CJ Stroud has really been coming on as of late. 13 touchdowns. They just blew up Rutgers last week. And this is an offense that has scored 50-plus in 2 straight weeks. It's hard for me to see the Buckeyes losing this one, considering they're 21-point favorites. You have guys like Travion Henderson, who has 7 touchdowns, averaging over 9 yards a clip. Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson are combining for 9 touchdowns throughout the season. And defensively, I love their interior defensive line. I don't think Maryland's going to be able to run the football at all in this game. You have guys like Haskell Garrett and Tyleik Williams, who your 2 defensive tackles have a total combined 7 sacks through 5 games. That's very impressive. Your defensive tackles should not be – those should be sack numbers for the season for defensive tackles. That shouldn't be their sack numbers through 5 games. But, Brian, you mentioned that brutal loss to Iowa at home. And really the only player that scares me for the Terps is Dante Demas Jr., over 500 receiving yards on the season. He has big play potential, but the Buckeyes are going to roll in this one and remain undefeated. Or, I'm sorry, improve to 5-1. I stand mistaken.
Just to be clear here, I threw this game on here as a spite game, despite the fact that it's a 21-point spread here, and everyone is on Ohio State. Arkansas, Ole Miss, you both let us down last week. You could have been on here.
Don't do this to yourself, Brian.
I took them. I threw them off the schedule. We threw a little bit of Big Ten action on there. Mainly I just kind of want to watch, see how Tally does against probably their biggest game of the season. I do think he's a really good talent. He could have gone pretty much anywhere. Chose Maryland. Kind of a weird move. Maryland hasn't been the greatest. I think they had 2 seasons ago. They had a pretty decent season, but when you got Alabama knocking on your door because your brother went there, and just about every other top 10 team knocking on your door, choose Maryland is very interesting. So I'd like to see how he does here in his biggest test so far. It'll be interesting to watch him progress as a player. But like you guys, touched on all of these weapons for Ohio State, this is probably going to get ugly very fast. I'm actually on the minus 21 here for Ohio State. I think they probably hit that by the 3rd quarter. So it'll depend on whether they want to coast or not. I think not. They've already got that loss, so they need to start pounding people to get back in the conversation, get on everyone catching their eye on what Ohio State is doing. So I think they're just going to keep pounding the rock, running up that score here. I'm taking Ohio State as well. Moving into 3:30, the biggest ranked matchup for the Big Ten that has not included Ohio State since 1997. We have
crazy.
number 3 Iowa versus number 4 Penn State, both undefeated coming into this game. Tom, we'll start with you on this one. Who is taking this game?
Well, both teams have been very, very impressive, and I think the line is 1.5 right now in Iowa's favor. Both teams are 5-0. Penn State has some weapons though. Jahan Dotson, 450 receiving yards on the year. Sean Clifford has looked a little better over the past couple of weeks, and their safety Jair Brown with 3 picks on the season. There's another name for you defensively, but this is what scares me about Iowa in this game. Iowa pretty much has a clean schedule after this game. If you look at your schedule, if you look at the Hawkeyes schedule, who could they potentially lose to?
Illinois.
Can you imagine?
This is the dilemma I'm having with this game. Am I sold on Spencer Petras? No. He only has 7 touchdowns on the year, but Tyler Goodson has been a damn good running back. And Sam Laporta at tight end has been a great option for them. The home crowd's going to be rocking. They have a defense that features Riley Moss, 3 picks on the year. Lucas Van Ness has 4 sacks. And this is a stat to keep in mind. Iowa has not given up more than 17 points in a game this season. And last year, they went into Happy Valley and they slaughtered Penn State. They beat them by 20 points, 41-21 final. Give me the Iowa Hawkeyes, and I know Andy is going to absolutely voice his displeasure on me saying that, but Iowa is going to remain undefeated and improve to 6-0.
Andy, are you pleased or displeased with that call from Mr. Scavetta?
Listen, I don't love it. I think he's right. I mean, Iowa leads the nation in turnovers. They've forced 12 interceptions, 16 total takeaways, and they're second in scoring defense at 11.6 points per game. Sean Clifford has an uphill battle for the Nittany Lions here at quarterback. He's having a bounce back year. Last year going back and forth with Will Levis, who, Levis ends up in Kentucky. But, for the year, Clifford, 1,300 yards, 11 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. He has to take care of the ball on Saturday. This is going to be a sloppy Big Ten game, guys. It's going to be like 9-6. I'm calling it. Field goals, punts from the 40-yard line, Big Ten football, run it down your throat, and see if they can stop you. I love Jahan Dotson, of course, on the outside for the Nittany Lions. We'll see if they can get him loose for a big play. I think that could go a long way. But, I mean, you mentioned it. Goodson's having an outstanding year. This defense has been untouchable, and I think they're going to have to continue to be untouchable on Saturday. But at Kinnick, I have to take Iowa here.
Yeah, I mean, I did not expect this to be a sweep, but I'm also taking Iowa. The home crowd, I think, is going to be very helpful. Listen, those turnovers are huge. I know probably no one here is on the Spencer Petras train. He's a bit of a slowpoke. I mean, it's kind of classic Iowa, so I mean, I don't know what people expect, but the biggest thing to me is, those turnovers and the fact that Iowa, that offensive line through the season so far, through those 5 games, has only allowed 11 sacks. He only has 7 touchdowns. Sure, not the greatest QB in the world, but they're only giving up, 11, so about 2 sacks a game, 2.2 sacks a game. When you have a QB that doesn't have that star potential, what do you need to do? You just need to give him some time. If you can give him time and he can make decent decisions, sure, dump it down 5-6 yards. If they need to kick field goals, do it. They've got the line to do it. They've got the defense to get the turnovers. Another thing, they have dominated time of possession, averaging 36 minutes per game of ball time. And the only games where they've lost time of possession was the easy game against Indiana, where they just kind of, phrases is skipping my mind right now.
Find it, Brian.
No, it's not.
Find it.
It's not going to come. But the Indiana game and the Kent State game were the only ones where they lost time of possession. The other ones just absolute domination. Those are three big things in a game like this. It's going to be slow. It's likely going to be low scoring. Time of possession, turnovers, and an offensive line that can give your QB time. So I'm also going Iowa here. Very interesting that was a sweep. I thought we'd have someone on the Nittany Lions there, but that is not the case. If you don't want to watch that game, you can watch a little bit of SEC action. We have Auburn taking on the Dogs on CBS. Georgia coming off an obliteration of Arkansas, a dismantling of Arkansas, taking on Auburn. Who's taking this game, Andy?
Well, so you guys know how we saw last week, Bo Nix kind of just like scrambling for his life and making a couple throws that you're just like, what the hell just happened? I think that's going to happen a lot, minus the what the hell just happened throw. Like he's going to be scrambling for his life and he might actually die because this Georgia defense is just insane. The exact same thing they just did to Arkansas is about to happen to Auburn. I don't see how Auburn moves the ball in this game. You know, Hunter has been pretty serviceable at running back for the Tigers this year with 447 yards and 4 touchdowns. But I don't trust Bo Nix. I just can't. I know he had that great game last week in Baton Rouge, but this is the best defense in the country. They were able to put up 37 points last week, and they had like 73 yards passing. It's like if they're 270 yards on the ground, 70 yards passing, they still put up 37 points. I don't know how you're supposed to beat that, especially an Auburn Tigers team. I know they have to go to Auburn, so they'll have a little bit. They'll probably have some juice there, but I just don't see how Brian Harson's squad is going to be able to get by Kirby Smart's team here. I'm taking Georgia, and I'm taking them big.
Tom?
Yeah, I'm going with Georgia too. I mean, despite the questions at quarterback, I mean, JT Daniels probably won't be available.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia's coming off that impressive 37-0 win. The defense has not given up more than 13 points a game this season. And one player who's really stuck out to me is their freshman tight end, Brock Bowers, has 4 touchdowns. He's up there with Mayer for one of the best tight ends in the nation right now. And their defense is always good. Their defensive players always pan out in the NFL. M'Kobe Dean and Adam Anderson have been great. Bo Nix, he has 0 interceptions through 5 games, which has been impressive. But Andy did mention that his O-line has been struggling out there. They did lose to Penn State on the road. He mentioned Jarquez Hunter. I also like Tank Bigsby at running back too. 4 touchdowns for him.
Tank.
And the Tigers, give them credit. I mean, they have 15 sacks, so they're averaging 3 sacks a game. They're going to have to rely on pressuring this young quarterback. I think that's their only chance. I think Smoke Monday and Roger McCreary are key in the secondary. But give me Georgia.
Smoke Monday. That is just like the best name of all time.
It really is. You said Georgia, Tom?
Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I figured. Yeah, I'm taking Georgia as well. That was extremely surprising. Bo Nix has always been sketchy, but I didn't think to look at his interceptions. I just figured there would be a few. The fact that he has none, with the way that his O-line makes him scramble, is absolutely mind-blowing, honestly. But yeah, there's just so many weapons here for Georgia, especially on the ground. They've got 5 guys who have over 20 carries, so they're sharing the ball. Obviously, Zamir White, probably the top talent of that group, I would say. But everyone's showing out. They already have 2 runners over 200 yards so far. White has 4 touchdowns. They're just going to do exactly what they did to Arkansas. Again, it's going to be take 2 here, I think. So yeah, Auburn, sure, you got the home field here. Not going to have those loud Georgia fans behind you, but like you said at the beginning of the show, Andy, this is by far the best defense in college football. So I think they roll here. I'm taking Georgia as well. And then moving into our 7:30 slot, we have Kentucky, who just got fined for that big-ass win, that big-ass storming of the field against Florida, taking on a Derek Stingley-less LSU. Tom, is no Stingley going to be a factor here, and does Kentucky pull it off?
LSU plays 5 straight ranked opponents, and it starts this week with UK. Then they have to play Florida, Ole Miss, Bama, and Arkansas. I don't think they're going 0-5 in all 5 of those games. I think Max Johnson has been impressive, 16 touchdowns to just 4 picks. I know UK is favored by 3.5. Problem with LSU, their running game has been non-existent. They've clearly been relying on Keyshawn Boutte, who has 9 touchdowns, tied for the most in the nation, by the way, through 5 weeks. And my favorite player on this LSU Tiger squad is BJ Ojolari, 4.5 sacks, and they have Damone Clark, a solid linebacker. Kentucky is coming off a solid upset win over Florida, but here's a few concerns I have with Kentucky. Their quarterback play has been questionable, right? Will Levis, not the best quarterback out there. They have the leading rusher in the SEC with Chris Rodriguez, and they have the leading receiver with Wan'Dale Robinson. However, what's missing? Their defense can't force turnovers, and they've also had a lot of luck on their side. Yusuf Corker has been good. JJ Weaver has been good. But I'm going to be honest with you guys. After a big upset win like that, usually after that, you kind of come back down to earth.
It's a classic letdown spot, Tom. It's a classic letdown spot.
I watched Coach O's pregame interview last night while I was doing my notes. LSU will win this football game tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
You might have flipped me here, Tom. But no, I've been very undecided about this game. The win over Florida, I think, was really nice. But like you said, Levis, I mean, he's kind of like a Petrus, except he doesn't have that O-line to stop him from throwing a million interceptions. 8 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Not a great ratio there. Max Johnson, having an NFL dad, a little bit better here.
Hand up. I had no idea he was Brad Johnson's kid until this Saturday.
To be fair, I only knew it because Brad Johnson played for the Bucs. So, but yeah. So
you seen Brad Johnson's trick shot videos on TikTok? That's like what he does now.
I have not. Kind of scary that someone that age has a TikTok, but I might have to check it out. Might have to download TikTok for that one. But yeah, Max Johnson making much better decisions on a much better team. I do think, the absence of Stingley is going to give Levis a little bit of a chance here. But I just think LSU is probably the better team top to bottom. Keyshawn Boutte is just an absolute animal. Like you said, that they probably rely on passing a little bit too much. That could be because of Max Johnson, because he looks so good so early. But yeah, that ground game, they're averaging less than about 70 yards on the ground per game, which is not typical of an LSU team at all. They usually get some big running backs come out of there going into the draft. Kiner, 2 touchdowns, 160 yards. It's not great for a ground game for a team like LSU. So I think Kentucky has a chance here, but I like LSU to win it, so I'm taking the Tigers. Go Tigers. Andy?
Well, I love Coach O. Go Tigers.
That was a good impression, Brian.
Thank you.
So we talked about Harbaugh earlier, right? And his back being kind of up against the wall. Coach O's back is up against the wall in Baton Rouge, guys. You would never think to say that 2 years removed from a national championship, but in the craziness that is the SEC and all of their fan bases that expect all of their teams to win the national championship every single year, Coach O is on the hot seat. Last year was bad. They're 3-2 now this year after blowing that game against Auburn last week. You put most of their games coming up into must-win territory. You mentioned Boutte, Tom, against the AP top 25 ranked opponents. He's averaging 21 yards per catch. Get the ball in his hands and just let him make plays. We mentioned the run game not being really existent at all. I think that's going to something that they're going to have to try to attack this weaker Kentucky defense at. But I mean, Chris Rodriguez Jr., he's averaging 6.1 yards per carry in conference play. He's been incredible for the Wildcats. Levis is going to have to take care of the ball, but I also like his dual threat ability. He can kind of move a little bit with his legs. And then Wan'Dale Robinson. I remember him from Nebraska, the transfer. He is just absolutely electric. See if you can get him down the field, make some big plays without Stingley on the field. Kentucky wins this ball game, guys. As much as I hate to pick against LSU, I love Coach O. Like Death Valley at night is a bucket list for me. Seeing a game there. But I just think Kentucky is the better team right now. They're a ranked team. They're gonna try to prove something. One more win gets them bowl eligibility. Bob Stoops is probably the best coach that. Is it Bob Stoops? No. Who's their Mark Stoops? It's a Stoops, whichever fucking one.
Stoop kid.
Is. The Stoop kid. Stoop kid can't come off the stoop. Whichever Stoop it is at Kentucky, he is arguably the best coach they've ever had. I think LSU struggles again. I think they fall to 3-3. Kentucky stays undefeated. I'm going against the grain. I gotta pick a different. I gotta pick one different game from you guys trying to catch up in these standings.
There you go. A little bit of strategies there, and then in our chaser slot for 7:30. We have Air Force, the Falcons, taking on the Wyoming Cowboys. Air Force 4-1. Cowboys undefeated so far this game at Air Force. Tom, who's taking this?
So Air Force, they're 1-1 in the Mountain West, and when I look at their schedule, I noticed they've manhandled everyone else besides Utah State, and they only lost to them by 4 points. They're a run-heavy offense. Brad Roberts has been great for them, 5 touchdowns. Their quarterback, Hazik Daniels, has 8 touchdowns, so they have 2 players with over 400 rushing yards, and Micah Davis has 4 rushing touchdowns and has their only receiving touchdown of the season. So you're going to see, a lot of RPOs. You're going to see a lot of triple options in there, and that's going to confuse the heck out of Wyoming, I think. Vince Sanford, 5.5 sacks for them defensively, and Corvan Taylor with 3 picks. They have good playmakers on their defense. When I look at Wyoming, Sean Chambers did not look impressive at all against UConn. UConn has been abysmal this year, and Wyoming barely squeaked by them by 2 points. So, I really don't know. I'm going to go with Air Force here, strictly due to the way that they've played against, their first 5 opponents. They've looked like the much better team, and I think that 6-point line will definitely work out in their favor. I have Air Force winning this football game.
All right, Andy?
I agree with everything Tom just said. I mean, if you look at Wyoming's first 4 games on the year, they've won all but one of them by only 1 score, and that includes that 2-point victory over a UConn team that hasn't won God knows how long. Speaking of UConn real quick, can't believe this didn't make shots and chasers. Winless UConn versus winless UMass this week, ladies.
I thought about it.
Get up.
I thought about it.
Game of the century. Game of the century. But yeah, I'm not sold on on Wyoming, right? So it's like their biggest win is a 45-12 victory over Ball State in week 3, but it just, other than that, you get UConn by 2 points. You beat a Northern Illinois team by a touchdown, which, albeit they did score 50, but they let up 43 in that game as well. And then you beat Montana State, who I believe is an FCS school, by only 3 points. So I'm taking Air Force. I think they're going to confuse them with the RPO, with the run game, and I think they roll over the Cowboys, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up the toilet bowl, because I almost put it. I almost did put it on here, but it was a close one. Yeah, so I mean, we haven't had any Mountain West action. These are 2 decent teams here. Like you said, Tom, big run game from Falcons. Over 300 yards, over 350 yards actually per game on the ground. So the biggest stat you want to look at here, a team that runs that much, that heavy, that many carries, how many fumbles are they having? They've lost 1 fumble all season so far. That's really nice. They have 5 fumbles, in total, but they've only lost 1. I didn't go back and watch all the footage. Some could have been, legitimate, other team could have hopped on it. Some, might just be fluke things, but they've only lost 1. That's what you want to see when you're a team that focuses so heavily on the run here. This is a home game for the Falcons. I love the teams that can pull off, the triple option. As an AAC watcher, we get this a lot. UCF has played Georgia Tech a few times. We play Navy all the time. It's annoying to watch as an opposing fan, but as a neutral, it's really fun to watch. So I'm going with the Falcons here. and that run game over Wyoming. As we transition here, we have a segment that we are going to bring back from previous years here. The Pac-12 disappoints day in and day out. So instead of giving it, full segments here, putting it on shots and chasers, we give it the allotted time that it deserves, which is just 12 seconds. Andy has decided to take on the Pac-12 seconds for this week. It's first week back in the 2021 season. So on your go, you can rant, rave, whatever you want about the Pac-12, and I will tell you when your time is up. And we no longer talk about the Pac-12 today, so go at it.
The Pac-12 refs are a fucking joke. They just gave Stanford that game. They absolutely blew Oregon's chances to make the college football playoff. Fucking pass interference, my ass. That receiver pushed off in the corner of the end zone. They got a free touchdown.
Time. All right, that was a pretty good Pac-12 seconds there. I like the speed at the end with a countdown, but that will
Gotta get it in. Gotta get it in.
gotta finish the thought. But that will wrap it up for us, you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the show. Links are down in the description.
Baby. 2 and 4.
And Andy's links also down below, and Tom's links also down below in the description. Enjoy the games this week, everyone, and we will see you next week.